The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached the stars. They had built colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. They had developed faster than light travel and sent exploration ships to distant systems. They believed they were alone in the universe. They were wrong. Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship, resolute, and stared at the message displayed on the main screen. His face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. The message had come from deep space, and it was not friendly. Stay in your corner of the galaxy, young species. The war has no place for primitives. Commander Lisa Brennan walked up beside him and read the message again. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a quick mind. She had served under Morrison for 10 years and had never seen him look so troubled. Who sent this? She asked. Morrison turned to the communications officer. Show her. The screen changed to show a star map. Red lines marked the boundaries of something called the Valoran Dominion. They controlled 12 star systems and had been spacefaring for over 10,000 years. Blue marks showed the territory of the Keth swarm. They were not a species in the traditional sense. They were a hive mind that consumed everything in its path. The war between them had lasted 300 years and billions had died. Lisa studied the map and felt cold fear creep into her heart. The battle lines were moving. The Valoran were losing, and Earth sat right in the path of the advancing Keth forces. How long do we have? She asked. Morrison's voice was heavy. Our listening posts detected Keth scout ships near Proxima Centauri. They have found us. Maybe 6 months before they arrive in force. The news spread quickly through Earth's government. Emergency meetings were held in secret bunkers. Scientists and military leaders argued about what to do. Some wanted to hide. They said humanity should go silent and hope the Keth passed them by. Others said that was foolish. The Keth had already detected Earth's transmissions. They knew humanity existed. Hiding would only delay the inevitable. President Maria Vasquez listened to all the arguments. She was a strong woman who had led humanity through difficult times before. But nothing had prepared her for this. She asked for reports on Earth's military strength. The numbers were not encouraging. Humanity had 300 warships designed for patrol duty and minor conflicts. The Keth swarm had millions of vessels. General Patricia Keller presented the military assessment. She was old and scarred from a lifetime of service. Her voice was calm as she described the situation. We cannot match their numbers, but we have advantages they do not expect. Our ships are faster. Our weapons are more precise. And we have something the Valoran lack. What is that? The president asked. Keller smiled grimly. We are desperate. And desperate humans have done impossible things throughout history. The decision was made within a week. Humanity would not hide. They would not surrender. They would fight. President Vasquez addressed the United Earth Council, and her words were broadcast to every colony and outpost. We did not seek this war. We did not ask for this enemy. But we will not cower from it. If the galaxy believes humanity is weak, let us show them otherwise. Let us show them what we are made of. The response was overwhelming. Volunteers flooded military recruitment centers. Factories that had built civilian goods converted to weapons production. Scientists worked day and night to improve ship designs and develop new technologies. The orbital shipyards around Earth and Mars worked without rest. Admiral Morrison was put in charge of the defense fleet. He spent his days reviewing battle plans and his nights studying reports on Keth tactics. The aliens fought like a swarm of insects. They had no individual thought or strategy. They simply attacked in overwhelming numbers until their enemies were crushed. The Valoran had tried to fight them with conventional tactics and had failed. Morrison knew humanity needed a different approach. He called his senior officers together on the Resolute. Commander Lisa Brennan was there along with Captain Daniel Hayes of the reconnaissance vessel Nightingale. Lieutenant Commander Scott Palmer represented the tactical division. They were the best minds in the fleet. "The Keth will expect us to defend Earth directly," Morrison said. "They will expect us to form a defensive line and wait for their attack. That is what the Valoran did. That is why the Valoran are losing." He pulled up a display of the Sol system. Saturn's rings glittered like a band of diamonds around the giant planet. "We will not wait for them to attack. We will choose the battlefield. We will draw them in and hit them where they do not expect." The plan was bold. Human ships would hide in the rings of Saturn, using the ice and rock to mask their signatures. When the Keth arrived expecting easy prey, they would find a trap waiting for them. Weeks passed and the fleet prepared. New weapons were installed on every ship. Crews trained for combat scenarios they had never imagined. Fear was present in every heart, but so was determination. Humanity had faced extinction before. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed civilization. They would survive this too. Captain Hayes returned from a scouting mission with news. The Keth advance force was coming. 200 ships were heading toward Sol System. They would arrive in 3 days. Morrison received the report with calm acceptance. He had done everything he could to prepare. Now it was time to see if humanity truly had what it took to survive in a hostile galaxy. He stood on the bridge of the Resolute and looked at the crew around him. They were young and old, men and women, scientists and soldiers. They represented the best of humanity, and they were ready to fight for their home. "Send a message to all ships," Morrison said. "Tell them the wolves are coming. And tell them we are ready." The fleet moved into position among Saturn's rings. 300 ships fell silent and waited in the darkness. The stars above them burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Keth were coming to destroy everything humanity had built. But humanity was not going to make it easy for them. The first great battle of the human Keth, war, was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Keth arrived on the 3rd day, just as Captain Hayes had predicted. 200 alien vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol System. They moved with terrible purpose toward the inner planets. Their ships were organic things that pulsed with sickly green light. They looked like giant insects made of metal and flesh. They were designed for one purpose, and that purpose was destruction. Admiral Jack Morrison watched them from the bridge of the Resolute. His fleet was hidden among the ice and rocks of Saturn's rings. The ships ran on minimal power with all active sensors turned off. They were ghosts waiting in the darkness. "They are not even scanning for threats," said Lieutenant Commander Scott Palmer. He was studying the tactical display with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "They have no defensive formation, no flanking groups. They are coming straight at us like they own the system." Commander Lisa Brennan nodded slowly. The Valoran intelligence was right. The Keth have never faced real resistance from a younger species. "They expect us to run or surrender." Morrison said nothing. He was counting the seconds until the enemy reached the optimal engagement range. His heart was calm and his mind was clear. He had waited his entire career for a moment like this. Not because he wanted war, but because he knew someday it would come. And he had prepared. The Keth commander broadcast a message as its fleet approached. The translation software struggled with the alien language, but the meaning was clear enough. "Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and we will harvest your planet slowly. Your children will watch their parents die. Your species will end in screaming agony." Morrison opened a channel to respond. His voice was steady and cold. "This is Admiral Jack Morrison of the United Earth Navy. You have entered sovereign human space. You have 30 seconds to withdraw before we consider this an act of war. The Keth response was something the translators identified as laughter. The alien ships did not slow down. They did not change course. They continued toward Earth with absolute confidence. Morrison waited until the countdown reached 0. Then, he gave the order. All ships engage. The human fleet erupted from Saturn's rings like vengeful spirits rising from the grave. 300 warships powered up their engines and weapons simultaneously. The Keth had no warning. They had not expected an ambush. They had expected prey. The first volley of railgun fire tore through the front line of Keth vessels. The weapons used magnets to accelerate metal slugs to incredible speeds. When those slugs hit the organic hulls of the alien ships, they punched through like needles through paper. Explosions bloomed across the void as reactors ruptured and ammunition cooked off. Captain Greg Sullivan led the first attack wing. His ship, the Talon, dove straight into the enemy formation with weapons blazing. Behind him came 40 more human vessels, all firing in perfect coordination. The Keth tried to respond, but they were confused and disorganized. Their commanders were dead before they could issue orders. Ensign Katie Morris worked the electronic warfare station on the Resolute. Her fingers danced across the controls as she flooded Keth communication frequencies with static and false signals. The aliens could not talk to each other. They could not coordinate their defense. They were blind and deaf in the middle of a killing field. The battle lasted 4 hours. Human ships swept through the Keth formation again and again. Nuclear missiles found their targets with surgical precision. Point defense systems shot down the few counterattacks the aliens managed to launch. When Keth ships tried to flee, they found human destroyers waiting to cut them off. Commander Lisa Brennan coordinated the pursuit from the tactical center. She tracked every enemy vessel and assigned human ships to hunt them down. Not a single Keth would escape to report what had happened here. The cost was not small. 11 human ships were destroyed in the fighting. The frigate Reliant was rammed by a desperate Keth vessel and broke apart. Her crew of 80 souls were lost. The destroyer Morning Star took a direct hit to her reactor and vanished in a flash of nuclear fire. Captain Hayes of the Nightingale watched helplessly as his sister ship, the Sentinel, was torn apart by Keth weapons. But when the last alien vessel fell silent, the numbers told a story no one in the galaxy would have believed possible. 163 Keth ships destroyed. 200 enemy vessels had entered the Sol system expecting an easy victory. 37 managed to flee into deep space, trailing smoke and fire. The rest were wreckage floating among Saturn's rings. Admiral Morrison stood on his bridge surrounded by cheering officers. He did not cheer. He was thinking about the crews who had died. He was thinking about the families who would never see their loved ones again. Victory had a price, and that price was written in blood. "Send a message to Earth," he said quietly. "Tell them the battle is won. Tell them humanity still stands." The news reached Earth within hours. Celebrations erupted in every city on the planet. People who had spent weeks in fear suddenly found hope again. The aliens were not invincible. They could be beaten. Humanity had proven it. But the celebrations on Earth were nothing compared to the reaction across the galaxy. The Valoran Dominion had spy probes scattered throughout the region. They had watched the battle unfold with growing astonishment. High Counselor Darek sat in his chamber on the Valoran homeworld and read the combat reports 3 times. He was ancient by human standards and had seen countless battles in the war against the Keth. He had never seen anything like this. A young species, barely a century into space travel, had just destroyed a Keth invasion force with minimal losses. It should have been impossible. The mathematics did not support it. And yet the evidence was undeniable. Who were these humans? He asked his advisors, but none of them had an answer. Across the galaxy, The word spread from system to system and species to species. Something new had entered the war. Something unexpected. Something that fought without fear and won against impossible odds. The Keth swarm would send more ships. They would send thousands. They would send millions if necessary. But for the first time in 300 years, there was a species that did not run when the swarm approached. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy, and the galaxy would never forget. The Valorans sent their envoy within 2 weeks of the battle. A single elegant ship appeared at the edge of human space and broadcast a request for peaceful contact. Ambassador Christopher Lane was chosen to represent humanity in the negotiations. He was a calm man with gray hair and sharp eyes who had spent 30 years in diplomatic service. He had negotiated treaties between nations and corporations and political factions. But he had never negotiated with aliens. The meeting took place aboard a neutral station near Alpha Centauri. Lane arrived with a small team of advisors and security personnel. The Valaran envoy named Sylith was waiting in the conference chamber. Lane had seen images of Valoran, but meeting one in person was different. Sylith was tall and slender with iridescent scales that shifted color as the light changed. Six Eyes studied Lane with obvious curiosity. "You are smaller than I expected," Sylith said. The translation device made the words sound flat and mechanical, but Lane detected something like amusement behind them. "We are small," Lane agreed, "but we are also stubborn." The negotiations began with pleasantries and moved quickly to the matter at hand. The Valaran Dominion had been fighting the Keth for 3 centuries. They had lost countless ships and worlds. Their military was exhausted and their population was weary. They needed allies. Sylith laid out the situation with brutal honesty. The Keth would return to human space in force. Not hundreds of ships this time, but thousands. Perhaps tens of thousands. Humanity had won a single battle, but the war was far from over. Without help from the Valaran, humanity would eventually be overwhelmed. Lane listened carefully, and then asked the obvious question. "What kind of alliance are you proposing?" Sylith's scales shifted to a darker shade. "We propose a defensive partnership. Human ships would join our fleets as auxiliary forces. You would follow our commanders and fight where we direct you. In exchange, we would share our technology and provide military support when the Keth attack your homeworld." Lane was silent for a long moment. He looked at his advisors. Their faces were carefully neutral, but he could see the anger in their eyes. Auxiliary forces. That was a polite way of saying cannon fodder. The Valaran wanted to use humanity to slow down the Keth, while their own fleets regrouped. Human soldiers would die by the millions to buy time for an empire that considered them primitives. "Let me make sure I understand," Lane said slowly. "You want our ships to fight under your command. Our people to die for your strategic objectives. And in exchange, you will share some technology and perhaps send help when it is convenient for you." Sylith nodded. "This is the standard arrangement for younger species who wish to join the Dominion. You should be honored that we are willing to offer even this much. Your victory over the Keth Scouts was impressive, but it does not change the fundamental reality. You are new to the galaxy. We have been fighting this war for longer than your species has existed." Lane stood from the table. "Then I believe we are done here." Sylith's 6 eyes widened with surprise. "You refuse our offer." "We refuse to be treated as servants in our own defense. If the Valaran want an alliance with humanity, it will be an alliance of equals. Our commanders will lead our fleets. Our strategists will plan our operations. We will coordinate with you as partners, not as subordinates." The Valaran envoy made a sound that the translator could not interpret. "You are arrogant for such a young species." Lane smiled without warmth. "Perhaps. But we are also the only species in 300 years to win a battle against the Keth. That should tell you something." The negotiations ended without agreement. Lane returned to Earth and reported to President Vasquez and the War Council. There were those who argued that humanity should accept the Valoran terms. Any help was better than none. But the majority agreed with Lane. Humanity would not trade its freedom for survival. They would find another way. General Patricia Keller had been waiting for this moment. She had spent weeks studying the war between the Valoran and the Keth. She had analyzed their tactics and their strategies, and she had found a pattern that no one else had noticed. The Valoran fight defensively, she explained to the council. They wait for the Keth to attack, and then they respond. They have been doing this for 300 years, and it has brought them nothing but slow defeat. Every battle they win costs them resources they cannot replace. Every battle they lose costs them territory they cannot regain. President Vasquez leaned forward. What do you propose instead? Keller's eyes gleamed with something that might have been excitement or might have been madness. We go on the offensive. We take the war to the Keth. The room fell silent. Attack the Keth in their own territory. It was an idea so bold that it bordered on insanity. The Valoran had never attempted it. No species had ever attempted it. The Keth homeworlds were defended by millions of ships and countless weapons platforms. It would be suicide. But Keller was not finished. Our scientists have been studying the Keth. Dr. Kevin Marsh at the Luna Research Institute has made a breakthrough. The Keth are a hive mind. They have no individual thought. All their actions are coordinated by queens who communicate through some kind of psychic network. And that network has a center. She pulled up a holographic display showing a world deep in Keth territory. The surface was covered with organic structures that pulsed with eerie light. This is what the Valoran call Nexus Prime. It is the heart of the Keth network. Destroy it, and the entire swarm will lose coordination. They will not be able to fight as a unified force anymore. Admiral Morrison studied the display with a frown. How do we get a fleet to Nexus Prime? It is in the heart of enemy territory. The Keth would detect us long before we arrived. Keller smiled. Dr. Marsh and his team have been working on something else. A new stealth technology that can hide ships from Keth sensors. It is experimental and dangerous. But it might be enough. The debate lasted for hours, but in the end, the decision was made. Humanity would not wait for the Keth to come to them. They would strike at the heart of the swarm and end this war on their own terms. Admiral Morrison began assembling a strike force in secret. Commander Nathan Cross was chosen to lead the tactical operations. He was known for his unconventional thinking and his willingness to take risks. Lieutenant Amy Hartwell was brought in as the xenobiology expert. She knew more about Keth biology than anyone else in human space. Together they began planning the most audacious military operation in human history. The Valoran did not know it yet. The Keth did not know it yet. But humanity was about to change the rules of this war forever. The strike force assembled in the shadow of Neptune far from prying eyes. 47 ships gathered in the darkness. They were the best vessels humanity had built. Fast and deadly, and equipped with the experimental stealth technology that Dr. Kevin Marsh had developed. Their crews were volunteers who understood that they might never return home. Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched the final preparations. Commander Nathan Cross was aboard the tactical cruiser Phantom, coordinating the operational details. Lieutenant Amy Hartwell was reviewing the biological data on the Keth one final time. Captain Greg Sullivan was running his bomber crews through simulated attack runs. Everyone knew what was at stake. Morrison called a meeting of all ship captains via secure communication. Their faces appeared on screens around the bridge. Young and old, men and women, all of them carried the weight of what they were about to attempt. You know the mission, Morrison said. We will travel through Keth space using the stealth systems to avoid detection. We will reach Nexus Prime and destroy the neural processing centers that coordinate the hive mind. Without those centers, the Keth will lose the ability to fight as a unified force. He paused and looked at each face in turn. I will not lie to you. Many of us will not survive this mission. The Keth will fight to defend their homeworld with everything they have. But if we succeed, we will end this war. We will save Earth. We will save the galaxy. No one spoke. No one needed to. They had all made their peace with what was coming. The fleet departed Neptune and jumped to faster than light speed. The journey to Keth territory would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks of tension and fear and careful planning. 3 weeks of wondering if the next moment would bring detection and death. Dr. Marsh's stealth technology worked better than anyone had hoped. The ships moved through Keth space like ghosts. They passed within sensor range of enemy patrols and were not detected. They slipped through defensive lines that should have been impassable. The Keth had never faced an enemy that could hide from them so completely. Lieutenant Hartwell spent the journey refining her weapon. It was not a bomb in the traditional sense. It was a biological agent designed specifically to attack the neural tissue and Keth processing centers. Once released into the atmosphere of Nexus Prime, it would spread through the organic structures and destroy them from within. The Queens would lose their connection to the network. The swarm would fall silent. Commander Cross reviewed the attack plan with his tactical team every day. They had studied the defenses around Nexus Prime, using data gathered by long-range probes. The planet was surrounded by thousands of Keth ships. Weapons platforms orbited in dense patterns. The surface itself was covered with organic structures that could launch fighters and fire energy weapons. We cannot fight our way through, Cross said. We need to be fast and precise. The bombers will make one run to deliver the payload. The rest of the fleet will provide cover and buy them time. Once the payload is delivered, we retreat immediately. Captain Sullivan listened to the plan with a grim face. His bomber wing would be flying straight into the heart of the enemy defenses. Most of his pilots would not survive. He knew it, and they knew it. But none of them asked to be removed from the mission. On the final day before arrival, Admiral Morrison walked through the corridors of the Resolute. He visited the crew quarters and the medical bay and the engineering sections. He shook hands with technicians and gunners and pilots. He thanked them for their service and their courage. Some of them were barely old enough to be called adults. They had signed up to defend their home, and now they were flying. Into the most dangerous mission in human history, the fleet emerged. From faster-than-light travel above Nexus Prime. Below them was a world that defied description. The entire surface was covered with writhing organic structures. Massive tendrils rose from the ground and reached toward the sky. Pulsing veins of bioluminescent material spread across the landscape like glowing rivers. It was beautiful in a horrible way. It was the heart of the enemy that had threatened to destroy everything humanity loved. The Keth responded immediately. Thousands of ships rose from the surface and the orbital platforms to meet the intruders. They came in waves so thick they blocked out the stars. Alarms screamed on every human vessel. The stealth systems had done their job, but now the fighting had begun and there was nowhere to hide. All ships engage, Morrison commanded. Bomber Wing, begin your run. The battle erupted in fire and death. Human warships dove into the Keth formations with weapons blazing. The Resolute led the charge with her railguns tearing through enemy vessels. Commander Cross on the Phantom coordinated the defensive screen that protected the bombers. Every second they bought was another second for Sullivan's wing to reach their target. Captain Sullivan pushed his ship to maximum speed. Around him his pilots flew in tight formation. Enemy fire filled the space ahead of them. Ships exploded to his left and right. Pilot after pilot died screaming as their vessels were torn apart. Sullivan did not slow down. He could not slow down. The mission was all that mattered. Lieutenant Hartwell watched the approach on her console aboard the Resolute. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady as she fed targeting data to the bomber wing. The neural processing centers were located in massive structures near the planet's equator. They pulsed with psychic energy that her sensors could detect even from orbit. Those structures were the key to everything. Sullivan's bomber took a direct hit that killed his co-pilot and destroyed half his navigation systems. Smoke filled the cockpit and warning lights flashed red. He flew on by instinct alone. Behind him, only 12 bombers remained from the original 30. It would have to be enough. Payload away, Sullivan reported as his ship released its cargo. The other surviving bombers did the same. Canisters fell through the atmosphere and broke apart, releasing the biological agent into the air of Nexus Prime. Sullivan's next transmission was calm and final. Target destroyed. Tell my family I love them. His signal cut out as a Keth vessel rammed his ship. The effect of the biological agent was not immediate. It took hours for the weapon to spread through the organic structures and reach the neural centers. But when it reached them, the result was catastrophic. Processing centers died one by one. The Queens lost their connection to the network. The psychic link that bound the Keth together for millions of years went silent. Across the galaxy, Keth fleets suddenly stopped moving. Ships that had been advancing in perfect coordination began drifting aimlessly. Attacks on Valoran colonies faltered as commanders lost contact with their queens. The swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 centuries was broken. The survivors of the strike force limped back toward human space. Of 47 ships, only 19 remained. Admiral Morrison stood on the damaged bridge of the Resolute and counted the cost. Friends and colleagues were gone. Brave men and women who had given everything for this victory, but they had won. Against all odds and all expectations, they had won. The galaxy would remember what humanity had done this day, and the galaxy would tremble. The news of Operation Thunderstrike spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with access to faster-than-light communication heard the story within days. A young species called humans had done the impossible. They had struck at the heart of the Keth swarm and broken the hive mind that had terrorized the galaxy for 300 years. The Valoran High Council received the reports with stunned disbelief. Councillor Tharek read the data again and again, searching for errors or deceptions. There were none. The humans had succeeded where the greatest military minds of the Dominion had failed. They had not just won a battle. They had changed the entire course of the war. The Keth did not collapse overnight. Their queens slowly rebuilt communication networks and reorganized their forces. Pockets of resistance fought on with desperate fury. But the unified swarm that had crushed countless worlds was gone forever. Now they were fragmented groups fighting without coordination. Easy prey for fleets that had spent centuries learning to fear them. Human ships led the counteroffensive. Admiral Morrison took the rebuilt First Fleet into Keth territory and systematically destroyed their remaining strongholds. Commander Lisa Brennan coordinated joint operations with Valoran forces that had once dismissed humanity as primitives. Commander Nathan Cross developed new tactics that turned every engagement into a victory. The tide of the war had not just turned. It had reversed completely. President Maria Vasquez traveled to the Valoran homeworld for a historic summit. She was the first human leader to set foot on alien soil. High Councillor Tharek met her personally and bowed his head in the traditional gesture of deep respect. "We were wrong about your species," he said. "We saw your youth and assumed weakness. We saw your small size and assumed frailty. We did not understand what we were seeing." Vasquez accepted the acknowledgement gracefully. "We do not blame you for your assumptions. We were unknown to the galaxy, but we are unknown no longer. The treaty that emerged from the summit created a true alliance between humanity and the Valoran Dominion. Not an arrangement of masters and servants, but a partnership of equals. Human officers would command human ships. Human strategists would plan human operations. And in exchange, humanity would help finish the war against the Keth. Once and for all, other species began reaching out to Earth. Ambassadors arrived from worlds that had never sent messages to Sol before. Trade agreements were proposed. Cultural exchanges were suggested. Species that had spent centuries hiding from the war now wanted to know the newcomers, who changed everything. The final campaign against the Keth lasted 3 years. Human and Valoran fleets worked together to eliminate the remaining hive clusters. It was brutal and costly work. Thousands more soldiers died in battles across 100 star systems. But step by step, the threat was eliminated. Lieutenant Amy Hartwell led the scientific team that studied the Keth neurobiology. Her research helped develop better weapons and more effective strategies. She also discovered something unexpected. The Keth had not always been monsters. Long ago, they had been a peaceful species that lived in harmony with their environment. Something had changed them. Something had corrupted their collective mind and turned them into the swarm that consumed worlds. Understanding this did not make them less dangerous, but it reminded humanity that even the greatest evil had origins that could be understood. On the 5th anniversary of the Battle of Saturn, a ceremony was held on Earth. Representatives from 37 species gathered in the rebuilt United Nations Plaza. Flags from a dozen worlds flew beside the flag of United Earth. Music played that combined human compositions with alien harmonies. It was a celebration of survival and hope. President Vasquez addressed the gathering with simple words. 5 years ago, humanity faced extinction. We had no allies. We had no experience. We had only our determination to survive. Today, we stand among the stars as partners and protectors. Not because we sought power, but because we refused to accept defeat. Admiral Jack Morrison stood in the crowd wearing his dress uniform. The medals on his chest represented battles won and friends lost. Beside him was Commander Lisa Brennan, who had become his closest advisor and his dearest friend. Behind them were the faces of those who had served. Some were scarred by the war. Some were missing limbs replaced by prosthetics. All of them carried memories of what they had sacrificed. High Counselor Thurek approached the podium after the president finished. His scales shimmered in the earth sunlight as he faced the assembled crowd. For 300 years, my people believed we were the guardians of galactic civilization. We were proud. We were arrogant. And we were losing. He paused and looked at the human leaders with his 6 ancient eyes. Humanity taught us that courage is not measured by age. Strength is not measured by size. And victory belongs to those who refuse to surrender no matter the odds. In the years that followed, humanity took its place among the stars. Not as conquerors seeking empire, but as protectors defending the innocent. The United Earth Navy expanded to patrol trade routes and defend colonies of every species. Human ships became a common sight in systems that had never known safety before. Some aliens feared what humanity might become with such power. They remembered how the Keth had once been peaceful before corruption turned them into monsters. They wondered if humans might follow the same path. Admiral Morrison addressed these concerns at his retirement ceremony. He was old now, with white hair and lines carved deep into his face by years of war. But his voice was still strong. Power is not measured by how many you can destroy. It is measured by how many you choose to protect. We did not fight the Keth because we wanted to rule the galaxy. We fought them because they threatened everything we loved. And now that the threat is gone, we will use our strength to ensure that no one faces such darkness alone again. The ceremony ended with music and celebration. But Morrison slipped away to stand alone on a balcony overlooking the city. Lisa Brennan found him there watching the lights of Earth spread beneath the stars. "You should be down there with the others," she said. "They want to thank you." Morrison shook his head. "The ones who deserve thanks are not here to receive it. Sullivan, Cross, all the others who gave everything." Brennan stood beside him in comfortable silence. Below them, humanity celebrated its victory. Above them, the stars burned with ancient light. Somewhere out there, species they had never met were telling stories about the humans, who had saved the galaxy. The war was over. The Keth were broken, and humanity had found its place among the stars, not as servants or subordinates, not as primitives or prey, but as equals, as partners, as the species that had made the galaxy tremble and then brought it peace. This was the legacy of those who had fought and died. This was the future they had purchased with their sacrifice. And humanity would honor that sacrifice by protecting the galaxy for as long as the stars continued to burn. The story of humanity among the stars had only just begun.